Welcome, adventurers. Today we're going to turn all of this random stuff into this, sort of. I'll explain as we go along. So, I find that I want to have little barrels and things for my displays and for tabletop gaming, and I had a great deal of difficulty finding even one pack of these little 1/35th scale barrels. And so with them, I decided I'm going to try to duplicate them. So I got some silicone mold making material and these and a few other things, and I decided to try to duplicate them, but it doesn't work out as I had planned. Putting the barrels together is easy. It's, putting a model together. So, grade school stuff. But I also wanted to make something that looked like kind of a moisture evaporator from Star Wars or something sci-fi antenna-like. And so I grabbed some random parts from soap bottles and little buttons and parts from, well, all kinds of things, and kind of just started slapping them together to see what it looked like. And I made these sort of antenna-looking scatter terrain pieces. I glued them all together, put some greebly bits on them from the dollar store action figure sets, and made a couple of different ones here. And of course, here's the little barrels put together. The little blue ones are wooden looking barrels, and of course the beige ones are kind of like regular old oil drums. So I measured out about how much space I needed on some poster board, some I guess foam core actually, and built little boxes to pour the silicone mold making material into. I did that for both the barrels and the moisture evaporator antenna looking things. And of course, whatever you're trying to make a mold of, you want to make sure that you have as little excess around it as possible, but enough to meet the needs of that mold. And in this case, the silicone required a 1/4 inch of space around the item that you were molding, minimum. I kept it to a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch, depending, and proceeded to make these little mold boxes. I also filled them in with a little extra material here and there because, well, silicone stuff is expensive, as you see here. I ended up buying 3 boxes of the mold rubber compound, $25 a container. That's $75. The yellow box on the right there is some sort of like kind of rubbery mold making material, similar to blue stuff, but not reusable in the sense that you can't heat it up and reshape it. Here it is. It's amazing mold stuff. It's a polymer compound, but it finishes very much like rubber. It's flexible and also rigid. It holds shapes well. I actually recommend this if you're going to make something that you want to make a lot of. Here I'm just pushing in some random bits that I have to see kind of what detail it would pull out. And honestly, this I'm really impressed with because it set up in about 15 minutes. It becomes very rubbery and hard, as I'm about to show you here. I cut a little pie wedge of it here to see how hard it is, and it's durable stuff. I mean, it's flexible yet holds shape, gets fine detail real well, to the point that I used not only like air dry clay, but also some milliput that I kind of diluted a bit here to smooth it out and kind of make an even coat. And as I pull it out, I mean, you can't argue with the results. It's very detailed. I'm not much of a mold maker, but if you wanted to duplicate something over and over again, this is good stuff. Definitely gets all the finest details, as you see there, even on these little gear buttons. I mean, it's nice, and it was fairly cheap. I think it was about $15, I think I said. And you can get into the finest of details using it, which is awesome. So, highly recommend. Got it at Michael's. And this mold I could probably use over and over again. Here's the silicone stuff. It seemed to mostly cure, but not 100% down on the inside. As I pull this piece out, there's actually a little piece of the silicone that's stuck to it that isn't fully cured. So I let it set for a few more hours before I decided to use some 2-part silicone. Epoxy. And here I'm just showing you there's measurements on the cups. I make 300 mils. This is 1-to-1 ratio, so 150 at part A, 150 at part B. Also gotten from Michael's. Stir it for about 3 or 4 minutes to make sure it's fully homogenized. and then using a wooden ice cream stick, I carefully apply it to this mold to make sure that I get it into all the little recesses without flowing it over the sides. Carefully pour it into my barrel molds and then into my little greebly bits. Now the tops of these antennas didn't actually come out when I pulled them out of the molds, so I figured it would pull them out if it came out. Here I mixed some yellow Liquitex into the remaining bits. I made more than I needed on purpose so I could do some color testing. Also some Games Workshop mixed into a bit. This is actually their red contrast paint, and I'm not a Games Workshop guru, so I don't know the name of it. And this is a Model Air blue paint from their Modern Buildings set. And some slime green from Army Painter. I wanted to see how well this stuff does. Now, it off-gases pretty well when it's shallow pour. I came back several times over the curing process to check on it and pop bubbles with a lighter. Now, I let this stuff sit for 5 days. First 3 days inside where I have air conditioning, and I was like, maybe it needs to be hotter. So I took it outside in the near 95-degree heat we've been experiencing, and as you see, it did nothing. It didn't solidify at all on any of the 3 molds that I poured it into. I don't know why, but here in the cups, it's hard as a rock. I mean, it set up solidly. The red from contrast paint from Games Workshop, solid, hard as a rock. This is the Liquitex ink, again, nice and solid. Cannot complain about that. And the blue from Model Air, I mean, it took the inks, it separated into them well, it looked great, and it's just the clear casting resin from Craftsmart. Now, the Army Painter paint did have a reaction. It set up, but it was still tacky and very flexible still, so I definitely will not be using Army Painter in this resin in the future. I don't know why, but that's the one I didn't like. The other 3, Games Workshop, Liquitex, and Model Air, it's set up fine. They dissolved fine. So I'm definitely marking which ones are which so I can use them again in the future. Now, I'm not build making stuff, so I didn't add sound effects, and I almost thought about doing each individual piece, but that would take too long. So I didn't make the barrels exactly like the other barrels so you could see that I didn't mold them. I didn't exactly mimic what I made before so that you could see that I made them. And I'm no expert at 3D design, but making these took about 53 minutes for the antenna / moisture evaporators. And here you can see my actual process. Highly sped up. I think it's 80 times the speed, but again, it took 53 minutes according to the recording time. And it's just geometric shapes modified and shaped in order to make these. I didn't do test prints. I just made them, slapped them on the printer, and printed them. I've got some failures in there, some layer lines and stuff because I'm sure my resin wasn't at the right temperature. But everything you see on the screen was designed by me. The vents, the buttons, everything. No one else created this stuff. And I scale it against a model that I designed on Hero Forge, I believe. Again, 8 of those antennas at $1.48. 40 or 50 of these barrels, I think, for $4. Again, 10 minutes to design the barrel. Nothing exciting at all. And again, only using Mesh Mixer, a free program. Scaling against that same figure. And $3.93 American to make those. And about 2.5 hours to print. And there you go. A bunch of barrels, definitely passable for scale and for what they are. Some antenna / moisture evaporator things that if I had taken more time in making sure my resin was ready would look better. Quick and dirty kind of black wash to add some detail highlight, followed by a basic gray dry brush to bring out some of the edges. And that's really all there is to it. Now, I came into this thinking that I see these people make these resin molded things all the time and it must be pretty easy. And it's not. There's got to be a ton of trial and error we don't see in these videos because mine failed. It reacted with the silicone mold making material somehow and did not set. In the plastic cups, it did fine. But in both the rubbery kind of yellow mold and in the actual silicone stuff, it failed horribly. So know that. Save your time and effort. Find out a lot of research before you go and buy the stuff, because I spent $100 on various things and ended up not using 90% of it. Here you can see my failed models, the ones I broke, the ones that I just glued together, and of course the ones I 3D designed and printed. Now I actually like the angle on that one panel. I wish it was intentional. It's just a failure in the printing. First one was just a satin gray. Rust-Oleum, this is the satin gray with black wash and a little bit of dry brushing. Here is the Model Air blue in the resin, the Army Painter red contrast in the resin, and the Liquitex ink in the resin, all of which did exceptionally well. And again, it off-gases really nicely. This is that yellowy stuff that I molded into things. Takes detail exceptionally well, and definitely worth doing things that are not two-part epoxy resin. Here's just a couple of stills so you can get a little bit of shot of what they look like. Again, nothing exciting, very basic, but 100% designed by me, which means you can definitely do it. And if you have more time, energy, and knowledge, you can do it better. Well, thank you for watching. Now go have an adventure in crafting.